What I'm about to share with you could save your life if you've ever booked a cruise or are planning to. I'm Mr. Nightveil, and after 6 months of investigation, accessing leaked documents and survivor testimonies, I've uncovered what the cruise line spent millions trying to hide from the public. The cruise industry generates over $150 billion annually by promoting their ships as floating paradises with state-of-the-art medical facilities. But leaked internal reports and survivor accounts tell a different story. One of medical equipment failures, healthcare disasters, and cover-ups that put millions of passengers at risk every year. Tonight, I'm sharing 9 documented cases from 2015 to 2023. Real passengers, real consequences, real medical nightmares that occurred when cruise ship healthcare systems failed catastrophically. Fair warning, some details are disturbing, but this 90-minute compilation contains information that cruise lines don't want you to know. Each story is backed by official incident reports, witness testimonies, and leaked medical records. If you cruise regularly or know someone who does, this could prevent a tragedy. Make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell, because this type of investigation takes months to complete, and there are more hidden dangers I'm still uncovering. Let's move to our first story, where a heart patient's life-saving equipment started failing the moment her heart needed it most. The celebrity eclipse cut through the North Atlantic like a steel cathedral, her passengers blissfully unaware that their floating sanctuary was about to become a medical nightmare. In the ship's state-of-the-art medical center, Dr. Amy Foster completed her equipment checks for the night shift. The cardiac monitoring station hummed with electronic precision, its multiple screens displaying perfect readouts from the ship's most advanced life support systems. Brenda had been counting down to this transatlantic crossing for 2 years. At 67, the retired librarian from Toronto had saved every penny to treat herself and her husband Brooks to Celebrity's premium suite experience. But 3 days into the voyage, as the ship encountered the season's first major storm system, Brenda felt that familiar flutter in her chest. The same warning sign that had preceded her emergency bypass surgery 2 years ago. "Brooks, something's wrong," she whispered, clutching the bathroom doorframe as pain radiated down her left arm. "It's my heart again." Brooks found her pale and sweating, her lips tinged blue in the harsh bathroom lighting. After 42 years of marriage, he knew that look. "I'm calling the medical center," he said, reaching for the emergency phone. The call came at 11:47 p.m. "Medical emergency, Deck 12, Suite 1247. Dr. Amy grabbed her emergency kit and raced through corridors that were beginning to sway as 15-foot swells rolled beneath the ship. She found Brenda conscious, but deteriorating rapidly, her breathing shallow and labored. "Tell me about the pain," Dr. Amy said, immediately taking Brenda's pulse. "Weak, irregular, dangerous. Like someone squeezing my heart with a fist." Brenda gasped. "It's different from before. Worse." Dr. Amy's portable ECG confirmed her worst fears. Brenda was experiencing severe cardiac arrhythmia, her heart rhythm chaotic and potentially fatal. "We need to get you to the medical center immediately," she told the couple, calling for the emergency transport team. As they wheeled Brenda through the ship's corridors, the storm outside intensified. The celebrity eclipse began pitching more violently, 20-foot waves crashing over her bow as she fought through the worst North Atlantic weather in years. In the medical bay, Brenda's condition deteriorated rapidly. The ship's rolling motion made every procedure more difficult, but Dr. Amy had dealt with rough seas before. What she hadn't dealt with was the perfect storm of mechanical failures that was about to unfold. "Anna, prep the defibrillator." Dr. Amy ordered her veteran nurse. Anna Williams had 15 years of cruise ship experience and had seen everything the ocean could throw at them. But as she powered up the primary cardiac unit, the ship lurched particularly hard to starboard, and the lights flickered ominously. Brenda's heart monitor showed increasingly erratic patterns, ventricular tachycardia that could turn fatal within minutes. Dr. Amy positioned the defibrillator paddles as Anna charged the unit to 200 joules. "Clear," Dr. Amy called out. But as she pressed the discharge buttons, the defibrillator's screen went completely dark. What the hell? Anna frantically pressed buttons, but the machine remained lifeless. The ship's electrical system, stressed by the storm and the constant battle against massive waves, had sent a power surge through the medical bay's circuits, frying the primary defibrillator's motherboard. "Get the backup unit now," Dr. Amy ordered, her voice tight with controlled panic. Brenda's monitor showed her heart rhythm becoming increasingly chaotic. As Anna wheeled over the backup defibrillator, a slightly older model that served as their failsafe, Brenda suddenly arched her back, her eyes rolling upward as her body went rigid. "She's coding," Dr. Amy shouted, immediately beginning chest compressions as Anna powered up the backup unit. But as the ship pitched violently in another massive swell, the backup defibrillator's screen flickered and died as well. "No, no, no." Anna slammed her hand against the machine. "This can't be happening." Brooks stood frozen in the doorway, watching his wife of 4 decades dying before his eyes as the ship's most advanced medical equipment failed catastrophically. "Do something," he screamed. "Please." Dr. Amy continued manual CPR, her hands pumping Brenda's chest as she barked orders to Anna. "Manual resuscitation bag. We do this the old-fashioned way." But as Anna reached for the emergency ventilation equipment, the ship's main power flickered again. One by one, the medical bay's systems began shutting down. The cardiac monitors went dark, the overhead surgical lights died, and even the backup emergency lighting began to fail. "Get flashlights," Dr. Amy commanded, never stopping her chest compressions. "Cell phones, anything." Anna grabbed her phone's flashlight, its pale glow barely illuminating Brenda's face, as Dr. Amy worked desperately to keep her alive. The ship rolled so violently that medical equipment slid across the floor, crashing into walls as the storm outside reached its peak intensity. "How long has it been?" Dr. Amy gasped, sweat dripping from her forehead despite the cold air rushing through the medical bay's ventilation system. 12 minutes, Anna replied, holding her phone steady to provide light. "Dr. Amy, we're losing her." Brooks collapsed into a chair, sobbing as he watched the 2 medical professionals fight against impossible odds. The ship's pride, its state-of-the-art medical center, had been reduced to a dark room where 2 women struggled to save his wife using only their hands and training. "For 3 more hours, Doctor." Amy and Anna took turns performing CPR in near total darkness. They managed to restart Brenda's heart twice using manual techniques, but each time, the weak pulse faded within minutes. Without functioning monitors, they were working blind, unable to track her vital signs or adjust their treatment. At 3:15 a.m., as the storm finally began to subside, Brenda's body went completely still. Dr. Amy checked for a pulse one final time, then slowly stepped back. "Time of death. 3:17 a.m., she whispered, her voice breaking. As the ship's power was restored 20 minutes later, the medical bay's monitors flickered back to life, their screens showing perfect, silent flat lines. The defibrillators rebooted with cheerful electronic chimes, their displays indicating "system ready" and "all functions normal." Brooks looked at the now functioning equipment through tear-filled eyes. They're working now, he said bitterly. They're all working now. Dr. Amy placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. Mr. Brooks, I want you to know that Brenda fought hard. We all did. Sometimes the technology we depend on fails us when we need it most. Later, the ship's investigation would reveal that a cascade of electrical failures had knocked out both primary and backup defibrillation units during the exact window when Brenda needed them most. The medical equipment that could have saved her life had been functioning perfectly just minutes before her emergency and would function perfectly for years afterward. But for Brenda, those crucial minutes when the machines went silent were the difference between life and death. In the middle of the North Atlantic, surrounded by millions of dollars of medical technology, she had died in darkness while her husband watched helplessly, and two skilled professionals fought with their bare hands against the mechanical failures that the cruise line would later call an act of God. The Celebrity Eclipse continued its journey to Southampton, carrying 2,849 passengers and the body of one woman whose heart had stopped beating the moment her life-saving equipment went silent. Let's move to our second story, featuring a ship's doctor who watched her digital monitoring system lie to her face while passengers died around her. The Norwegian Breakaway sliced through Caribbean waters under perfect blue skies, her 4,000 passengers enjoying what the cruise line marketed as the safest vacation experience possible. In the ship's high-tech medical center, Dr. Rebecca monitored the revolutionary digital health tracking system, a network of wearable devices, smartphone apps, and AI-powered sensors that promised to detect health threats before they became emergencies. It was March 2020, and the world was just beginning to understand the true nature of COVID-19. The Breakaway's advanced monitoring system tracked passenger temperatures through mandatory wearables, monitored respiratory patterns via cabin air sensors, and required daily health check-ins through the ship's app. Every screen in Dr. Rebecca's command center glowed green. All systems normal. No health threats detected. Passenger wellness optimal. Captain Andrew visited the medical bay on day 3 of the 7-day cruise, impressed by the technology. This system cost us $12 million, he told Dr. Rebecca with pride. The passengers love feeling safe, and we can detect outbreaks before they start. Rebecca nodded, watching the real-time data streams from 4,000 passengers. The AI is incredibly sophisticated. It cross-references temperature data, movement patterns, dining habits, even bathroom visit frequencies. If someone's getting sick, we'll know before they do. But passenger Weston was already feeling the early symptoms. A slight cough, mild fatigue that he attributed to too much Caribbean sun and rum. His wearable device dutifully recorded his elevated heart rate and slightly increased body temperature. The ship's app prompted him for his daily wellness check. "How are you feeling today?" the cheerful interface asked. Weston selected, "Great," without thinking, the way he always did. He was on vacation after all. His Apple Watch showed his temperature as 98.9 degrees Fahrenheit, within normal range according to the display. What Weston didn't know was that the ship's central monitoring system had developed a critical software glitch during the previous port update in Cozumel. The AI algorithm responsible for interpreting health data had begun averaging temperature readings over 24-hour periods instead of real-time monitoring. A fever spike that should have triggered immediate alerts was being smoothed out by normal readings from hours before. Nurse Bo noticed the first signs on day 5. "Doctor, Rebecca, I've had 12 passengers come to the medical bay with respiratory symptoms in the last 6 hours," he reported, reviewing his handwritten notes. "But the digital system shows 0 health alerts." Dr. Rebecca pulled up the monitoring dashboard. Every indicator glowed green. Passenger Virginia, who had just left the medical bay with a severe cough and 101 degrees Fahrenheit fever, showed up on the system as wellness status excellent, with a recorded temperature of 98.4 degrees Fahrenheit. Run a manual diagnostic on the system, Rebecca ordered, a cold dread settling in her stomach. Medical coordinator Kathleen joined them, her face grim. Doctor, I've been tracking passenger complaints manually. We have 47 people reporting flu-like symptoms. But according to the digital system, only 3 passengers have requested medical attention. Dr. Rebecca stared at her screens in growing horror. The system that was supposed to protect 4,000 lives was not just failing. It was actively hiding a potential outbreak. The AI had been reporting false negatives for days while passengers continued dining together, sharing elevators, attending shows, and spreading whatever was making them sick. "Get me Captain Andrew immediately," she commanded, her hands flying over the keyboard as she tried to access the system's raw data logs. When Captain Andrew arrived, Dr. Rebecca showed him the terrifying discrepancy. The digital system shows 0 health threats, but I have 63 passengers with documented respiratory symptoms in my handwritten logs. "That's impossible," Andrew insisted. "The system is foolproof. It cost $12 million, Rebecca interrupted. "I know, but it's been lying to us for at least 4 days. She pulled up passenger Weston's profile as an example. His wearable had recorded a fever spike of 102.1 degrees Fahrenheit at 3:47 a.m. But the ship's central system showed his highest temperature as 99.1 degrees Fahrenheit, below the alert threshold. The AI is averaging out the fever spikes, Bo explained, having discovered the glitch in the code. Instead of real-time alerts, it's smoothing the data over 24-hour periods. Someone could spike a 104-degree fever for 6 hours, and if their temperature was normal the rest of the day, the system would report them as healthy. Captain Andrew's face went pale. How many passengers could be infected? Dr. Rebecca began manually testing passengers who had visited the medical bay. The results were devastating. Of the first 50 rapid tests, 37 came back positive for COVID-19. The ship had been a floating incubator for days, while the digital monitoring system reported perfect health metrics. "We need to test everyone," Rebecca told the captain, "and we need to do it manually. The system we trusted to protect our passengers has been killing them." Kathleen coordinated the massive testing effort as doctor. Rebecca and Bo worked around the clock. Passenger Virginia tested positive, as did Weston and dozens of others who had been unknowingly spreading the virus, while their wearables reported normal vital signs. The final count was staggering. 847 passengers and 312 crew members had contracted COVID-19 during a cruise, where the digital health monitoring system never once triggered a health alert. The AI that was supposed to detect outbreaks before they started had instead provided a false sense of security while a pandemic spread unchecked through the ship. Weston, now hospitalized in the ship's expanded medical bay, looked at his smartwatch with bitter irony. Even as he struggled to breathe through COVID pneumonia, the device cheerfully displayed health status good and daily wellness goal achieved. Dr. Rebecca stood in the medical center surrounded by malfunctioning technology that had cost more than most hospitals' entire budgets. The screen still glowed green, still reported no health threats detected, even as hundreds of infected passengers filled every available medical space. $12 million, she whispered to Bo as they prepared for another 18-hour shift treating COVID patients. They spent $12 million on a system that was supposed to save lives, and instead it created the largest cruise ship outbreak in maritime history. The Norwegian breakaway limped back to port 2 weeks later than scheduled, carrying the broken dreams of a digital health revolution that had become a technological nightmare. The ship's AI continued reporting perfect health metrics right up until the moment the CDC boarded with hazmat suits and manual testing equipment. In the final investigation, Norwegian Cruise Lines would blame a software glitch for the system failure. But Dr. Rebecca knew the truth. They had placed blind faith in technology over human judgment, and that faith had cost lives. The wearables had detected the outbreak perfectly. It was the ship's supposedly superior AI that had chosen to ignore the warnings, smoothing out the data until a health crisis became invisible. The digital age of cruise medicine had begun with a promise of perfect safety. For 847 passengers, it had delivered the exact opposite. Let's move to our third story, involving a surgeon who had to operate in complete darkness when the lights went out mid-incision. Lincoln had been planning this Mediterranean cruise for 2 years, working double shifts at a campus coffee shop to save every penny. At 19, the pre-med student from Ohio saw this as his reward before starting the grueling MCAT prep that would determine his dream of becoming a doctor like his late father. His roommate Rowan had watched him count and recount their savings, seen him skip meals to afford the upgraded cabin with the ocean view Lincoln said his dad would have loved. "I can't believe we're actually here," Lincoln told Rowan on their third night aboard the Royal Caribbean Voyager, standing on their balcony watching the Mediterranean sunset. "Dad always said the ocean could heal anything. I wish he could see this." Rowan smiled, knowing how much this trip meant to his friend. Lincoln's father had died of cancer during Lincoln's sophomore year, leaving behind medical textbooks and a son determined to honor his memory by saving lives. But at 11:30 p.m., Lincoln woke up clutching his right side in agony. "Rowan, something's wrong," he gasped, his face pale and sweating. "It feels like someone's stabbing me." Rowan had never seen his friend in such pain. Lincoln was tough. He'd played through a broken wrist in high school football, worked with food poisoning rather than lose pay. But now, he was curled up on the cabin floor, tears streaming down his face. Dr. Adrian arrived within minutes of Rowan's emergency call. The 42-year-old surgeon had spent 15 years in cruise ship medicine, but something about Lincoln's youth and obvious determination struck him immediately. The kid reminded him of his own son. "Tell me about the pain," Adrian said gently, recognizing the terror in Lincoln's eyes. "It started as just discomfort after dinner," Lincoln managed between gasps. "But now, God, it feels like I'm being torn apart inside." Adrian's examination confirmed his worst fears: acute appendicitis with signs of early perforation. Lincoln needed surgery immediately, or the infection could spread throughout his abdomen and kill him within hours. "We need to get you to the operating room right now," Adrian told him. "I know you're scared, but we're going to take good care of you." As they wheeled Lincoln through the ship's corridors, Rowan ran alongside the gurney. "Is he going to be okay?" he kept asking, watching his friend's face grow paler. "He's young and strong," Adrian replied, though privately he was worried. The appendix was more inflamed than he'd initially thought. In the operating room, nurses Pamela and Martha prepared Lincoln for surgery, while Deborah handled anesthesia and Amanda coordinated with the ship's bridge. The weather report showed calm seas ahead, perfect conditions for the routine procedure. "Don't let me die," Lincoln whispered to Dr. Adrian just before the anesthesia took effect. I haven't done anything yet. I haven't saved anyone like my dad did." Those words hit Adrian like a punch to the chest. This wasn't just another appendectomy. This was a young man's entire future lying on his table. The surgery began smoothly. Adrian made his first incision with practiced precision, the bright surgical lights illuminating Lincoln's abdomen perfectly. But what none of them knew was that the ship was sailing directly into an unexpected storm system that Mediterranean weather services had failed to detect. Lincoln was unconscious, his infected appendix partially exposed, when the first massive wave struck the Voyager. The ship lurched violently, and Adrian had to grip the operating table to keep from falling onto his patient. "Just a rough patch," Amanda reported from her communication with the bridge. "Should pass quickly." But Adrian felt a cold dread in his stomach. The ship's motion was getting worse, not better. As he attempted to continue the delicate dissection, another wave sent surgical instruments sliding across the tables. "I can't keep anything steady," Martha called out, chasing down sterile clamps that had scattered across the floor. Adrian stared down at Lincoln's open abdomen as the ship rolled violently. "This kid trusted me," he thought. "He's counting on me to save his life, and I can't even keep my hands steady." The storm intensified with terrifying speed. Each wave made precise surgical cuts impossible. Adrian found himself fighting not just to remove Lincoln's appendix, but to prevent his instruments from causing additional damage as the ship pitched and rolled. "Focus," Adrian told himself. 15 years of experience. You can do this. But his hands were trembling, not from nerves, but from the constant motion that made every movement a battle against physics. "His blood pressure is rising," Deborah announced as another massive swell caused Lincoln's unconscious body to shift despite the restraints. Adrian was beginning to panic. What if I can't do this? What if this kid dies because I can't adapt to rough seas? The weight of Lincoln's trust, his dreams, his father's memory, it all pressed down on Adrian like the storm pressing down on the ship. Then disaster struck. A 40-foot rogue wave slammed into the Voyager's starboard side, throwing the ship into a violent roll that sent Adrian crashing against the operating table. His elbow struck Lincoln's exposed abdomen, and he felt something give way beneath the impact. "Massive bleeding," Pamela shouted as blood began pouring from Lincoln's surgical site. Adrian stared in horror at what he had done. His involuntary movement had torn Lincoln's mesenteric artery, an injury that could kill the teenager within minutes, if not controlled immediately. "I did this," Adrian thought, his mind reeling. "I hurt him. I'm supposed to save him, and I'm killing him. Doctor, we need to control the bleeding now," Martha urged. But Adrian stood frozen, watching Lincoln's life pour out onto the table. "Get it together," he screamed at himself internally. "This kid is dying, and you're the only one who can save him." With the ship rolling violently and Lincoln bleeding to death, Adrian forced himself to act. "I need you all to brace me," he commanded, his voice shaking but determined. Pamela and Martha positioned themselves on either side, trying to stabilize him as he worked to repair the arterial damage. But with each wave, Adrian fought not just the bleeding, but his own growing certainty that he was going to watch this young man die because of his mistake. His father was a doctor, Adrian remembered. He wanted to save lives like his dad. And I'm going to be the reason he never gets that chance. The surgery became a nightmare of blood and motion. For every suture Adrian managed to place, the ship's movement threatened to tear it loose. His hands cramped from gripping instruments too tightly, trying to compensate for the constant motion. "How long has he been bleeding?" Adrian asked, sweat pouring down his face. 43 minutes, Deborah replied grimly. Adrian had never felt so helpless in his life. 15 years of surgical experience, and he was reduced to praying that his next stitch would hold long enough to save a kid who reminded him of his own son. Rowan waited in the hallway outside, pacing frantically as the ship pitched around him. Every few minutes, he pressed his ear to the operating room door, trying to hear something, anything, that would tell him Lincoln was okay. Inside, Adrian worked for 3 hours against the Mediterranean storm, fighting to repair damage that never should have happened. When he finally controlled the bleeding and removed the appendix, Lincoln had lost so much blood that his survival remained uncertain. As the storm passed and the ship steadied, Adrian stood over Lincoln's still form, watching the monitors that showed a heartbeat growing stronger by degrees. The teenager would live, but the trauma to his abdominal cavity during the prolonged, violent surgery had caused nerve damage that wouldn't become apparent for weeks. Rowan was the first person Adrian saw when he emerged from the operating room at dawn, his surgical scrub stained with Lincoln's blood. Is he? Rowan couldn't finish the question. Adrian sat down heavily in the chair beside him. He's alive. But Rowan, I need you to know, the surgery didn't go the way it should have. The storm caused complications. Lincoln may not recover full function in his right side. Rowan stared at him. What does that mean? It means, Adrian said quietly, that his dreams of becoming a surgeon like his father, they might be over before they started. The words hung in the air between them. Adrian had saved Lincoln's life, but he may have destroyed the young man's future in the process. Over the following days, as Lincoln recovered in the ship's medical bay, Adrian visited him every hour. He watched the pre-med student's face when the physical therapist explained the extent of his nerve damage. He saw the moment Lincoln realized he might never have the fine motor control needed for surgery. Dr. Adrian, Lincoln said on their last day before reaching port, his voice barely above a whisper. My dad. He always said that sometimes doctors have to make impossible choices. That sometimes saving a life means accepting that some things can't be fixed. Adrian felt tears he hadn't shed since his own father's death. Lincoln, You saved my life. Lincoln interrupted. In a storm, on a ship, with everything going wrong. My dad would have been proud of that kind of courage. But Adrian couldn't find peace in those words. As the Royal Caribbean Voyager docked in Barcelona and Lincoln was transferred to a land-based hospital for continued treatment, Adrian knew he would carry the weight of that night forever. 6 months later, Adrian received a letter. Lincoln had changed his major from pre-med to biomedical engineering. I can't be a surgeon, he wrote, but I can design better surgical instruments. Maybe I can help other doctors save lives in storms. Adrian kept that letter in his medical bag, a reminder that sometimes the greatest failures can lead to unexpected forms of healing. But late at night, when storms rock whatever ship he's serving on, he still hears Lincoln's voice saying, Don't let me die, I haven't done anything yet. The Mediterranean had tested both men that night. One lost his dream of surgery but found a new purpose. The other saved a life but learned that some victories come with costs that haunt you forever. Let's move to our fourth story. About a passenger whose smartwatch detected death approaching hours before anyone would listen. Stephanie had planned this Caribbean cruise as the perfect family getaway. At 34, the software engineer from Seattle had saved for months to treat her husband Ian and their 8-year-old son Kai to a week of relaxation aboard the Celebrity Edge. What she hadn't planned for was the crushing chest pain that woke her at 3 a.m. on their third night at sea. The pain felt like someone was standing on her chest, radiating down her left arm in waves that made her gasp for breath. Stephanie had read about heart attacks. This felt exactly like what women experienced. She shook Ian awake, her voice tight with panic. "Something's wrong," she whispered. "My chest. I think I'm having a heart attack." Ian bolted upright, immediately alert. His wife was pale and sweating, her breathing shallow and rapid. "We're getting you to the medical center right now," he said, helping her sit up carefully. Kai woke as they prepared to leave, confused and frightened by his parents' urgent whispers. "Is Mommy okay?" he asked, watching his mother lean heavily against the cabin wall. Dr. Christian was on night duty when they arrived at the ship's medical center. The 45-year-old physician had been working cruise medicine for 8 years and had seen his share of cardiac emergencies. He immediately began examining Stephanie, noting her symptoms and medical history. "The pain started about 20 minutes ago," Stephanie explained, wincing as another wave of chest pressure hit her. "It's exactly like they describe women's heart attacks: crushing chest pain, arm pain, trouble breathing." Dr. Christian ran an EKG, which came back completely normal. Her blood pressure was elevated, but not dangerously so, and her heart rhythm appeared regular. "Mrs. Stephanie, I understand your concern, but your heart looks fine. These symptoms are often caused by anxiety or digestive issues, especially on cruise ships where people eat rich foods and experience stress from travel." But Stephanie wasn't convinced. "Doctor, I've never felt anything like this. Something is really wrong." Christian gave her antacids and a mild sedative, explaining that gastroesophageal reflux could mimic heart attack symptoms perfectly. "Cruise ship medicine teaches us that 90% of heart attacks are actually anxiety or indigestion. Your tests are normal. Try to relax." Ian felt relieved, but Stephanie remained uneasy as they returned to their cabin. The chest pain had subsided slightly, but she felt weak and dizzy in a way she'd never experienced before. Over the next 12 hours, Stephanie's condition fluctuated mysteriously. She would feel better for an hour, then suddenly become weak and shaky. Her hands trembled, and she found herself craving sugar constantly. Nurse Carolyn saw Stephanie twice more that day. Once for dizziness during lunch, and again for what Stephanie described as feeling like I might pass out. Each time, basic vitals came back normal, and the medical staff attributed her symptoms to cruise anxiety and overeating. "Some passengers just don't adjust well to ship life," Carolyn explained to Ian after Stephanie's third visit. "The combination of rich food, alcohol, disrupted sleep, and being away from routine can cause all sorts of physical symptoms." But Ian was growing concerned. His wife was normally energetic and healthy. He'd never seen her this pale and weak. Kai noticed too, asking why Mommy kept needing to sit down and why she wasn't eating her favorite desserts. Medical coordinator Marie became involved when Stephanie returned to the medical center for the 4th time in 18 hours. This time reporting blurred vision and confusion. "I can't think straight," Stephanie told her. "It's like my brain is in fog." Marie had seen enough cruise ship emergencies to recognize when something wasn't adding up. Stephanie's symptoms were inconsistent with anxiety or indigestion. The pattern suggested something metabolic. "Have you ever been tested for diabetes?" Marie asked. But Stephanie shook her head. At 34 and healthy weight, diabetes had never been considered. The ship's basic medical center had limited diagnostic equipment. No advanced blood glucose monitoring beyond simple fingerstick tests. When Carolyn checked Stephanie's blood sugar, the reading was 180 milligrams per deciliter, elevated but not critically high. "That's borderline," Dr. Christian explained. "Could be from the stress and the desserts you've been eating. Nothing to worry about." But Marie insisted on checking Stephanie's glucose again 2 hours later. This time it was 340 milligrams per deciliter, dangerously high and climbing. "She's in diabetic crisis," Marie announced, finally understanding what they'd been missing. Stephanie had been experiencing diabetic ketoacidosis for over 24 hours while the medical staff treated her for anxiety. The ship's limited medical equipment became a serious problem. They had basic insulin, but no intensive monitoring capabilities for severe diabetic emergencies. Stephanie needed immediate evacuation to a full hospital, but they were 200 miles from the nearest port. "Why didn't anyone test for this earlier?" Ian demanded as the medical team worked to stabilize his wife's blood sugar. Kai sat quietly in the corner, scared by the sudden flurry of medical activity around his mother. Christian looked uncomfortable. "Cruise ship medicine is limited. We see so many anxiety cases that sometimes we miss the real emergencies." Mrs. Stephanie's age and appearance didn't fit typical diabetes patterns. Technical crew member Enzo coordinated with the Coast Guard for emergency evacuation, while IT specialist Axel managed communication with mainland hospitals. But the weather was deteriorating, making helicopter extraction impossible. For the next 8 hours, Stephanie remained in critical condition as her untreated diabetes progressed to life-threatening levels. The ship's basic medical center was simply not equipped for intensive diabetic care. Passenger Christine, who was a nurse on vacation, volunteered to help when she learned about the medical emergency. "I've managed diabetic crises in ICU settings," she told Marie. "But without proper monitoring equipment, we're basically flying blind." Stephanie drifted in and out of consciousness as her blood chemistry became increasingly unstable. Ian held her hand while Kai asked repeatedly if Mommy was going to be okay, a question nobody could answer with confidence. The ship finally reached San Juan 18 hours after Stephanie's diabetic crisis began. Paramedics immediately transported her to San Juan Hospital, where emergency room physicians were shocked by her condition. "She should have been evacuated yesterday," the ER doctor told Ian. "Diabetic ketoacidosis this severe requires intensive monitoring and IV insulin management that cruise ships simply can't provide." Stephanie spent 4 days in the hospital's ICU before stabilizing. The delayed diagnosis and treatment had caused complications that would affect her for years: kidney damage from prolonged high blood sugar and nerve damage from diabetic ketoacidosis. Ian struggled with anger at the ship's medical staff, but also understanding of their limitations. They kept treating the symptoms instead of looking for causes, he told Marie when the ship visited Stephanie in the hospital. Dr. Christian was visibly shaken by the case. "In 15 years of cruise medicine, I've never missed a diabetic emergency this badly. We're trained to expect anxiety and indigestion, not serious medical conditions in young, healthy-looking passengers." Kai was traumatized by seeing his mother so sick and confused. For months afterward, he would wake up at night asking if Mommy's sugar was okay, having learned more about diabetes than any 8-year-old should need to know. Stephanie recovered enough to return to Seattle, but she was now insulin-dependent and dealing with permanent complications from the delayed diagnosis. The family's dream vacation had become a medical nightmare that changed their lives forever. The cruise line's incident report cited atypical presentation of adult-onset diabetes and limited diagnostic capabilities inherent to shipboard medicine. But for Stephanie's family, those explanations couldn't undo the damage caused by 18 hours of misdiagnosis. Christine later told Stephanie that her case had prompted changes in cruise ship medical protocols. earlier blood glucose testing for unexplained symptoms, and better training for recognizing diabetic emergencies in younger passengers. But Stephanie lived with the reality that a simple blood test, available in any doctor's office, could have prevented her complications if performed when she first reported chest pain. The advanced medical technology of a modern cruise ship had somehow missed one of the most common medical conditions in America. Ian still struggles with the what-ifs of that night. What if they had demanded more testing? What if they had trusted Stephanie's instincts over medical reassurance? What if the ship had been equipped for real emergencies instead of cruise ship medicine? The Celebrity Edge continues its Caribbean routes with updated medical protocols. But Stephanie's family knows the truth about cruise ship medical care. It's designed for common problems, not life-threatening emergencies that disguise themselves as anxiety attacks. For passengers in their 30s to 60s, Stephanie's story is a sobering reminder that serious medical conditions can strike during what should be the safest, most relaxing vacation of your life. Let's move to our fifth story, about a passenger who discovered the ship's medical staff was deliberately poisoning people to hide their own mistakes. Theo had worked as a health inspector for Minneapolis County for 23 years before his retirement. At 52, he could spot food safety violations from across a restaurant, identify contamination sources by smell, and recognize the subtle signs of deliberate poisoning that most people missed. This Alaskan cruise with his son Walker was supposed to be his reward for decades of protecting public health. He never expected to use those skills to save his own life. The Norwegian Star was 2 days into its inside passage route when Theo noticed the pattern. During breakfast, he watched a family at the neighboring table. Parents and teenage daughter looking slightly nauseous, picking at their food with obvious discomfort. Food poisoning, Theo diagnosed automatically. But not random. The timing is too perfect. Symptoms too uniform. His professional instincts kicked in as he observed more passengers throughout the day. By lunch, he'd counted 17 people showing early signs of gastrointestinal distress. All passengers who had eaten at specific dining venues, all presenting symptoms at precisely the same timeline. "Dad, you're doing it again," Walker said, noticing his father's analytical stare across the dining room. "You're supposed to be retired." But Theo couldn't shake what he was seeing. 23 years of investigating foodborne illness outbreaks. This isn't accidental contamination. This is deliberate. Someone is poisoning passengers in a controlled pattern. That evening, Theo approached one of the affected families, Janet and her husband, both looking miserable after their romantic dinner. "Excuse me," Theo said gently. "I'm a retired health inspector. You both look like you might have food poisoning. Have you been to the medical center?" Janet nodded weakly. "Dr. Aaron said it was just seasickness. Gave us some pills and told us to rest. Seasickness doesn't cause simultaneous onset in multiple passengers," Theo thought. And experienced ship doctors know the difference. The next morning, Theo visited the medical center himself, claiming mild nausea. Dr. Aaron was a 48-year-old physician with an immediately dismissive attitude toward passenger complaints. "Seasickness is very common," Aaron explained, without conducting any real examination. "These pills will help." He handed Theo a small bottle of medication without checking symptoms or asking detailed questions. No diagnostic questions, no examination, just pills, Theo noted. Either he's incompetent or he already knows what's making people sick. Theo pocketed the pills without taking them and began his own investigation. Using his health inspector credentials, he gained access to the ship's food service areas by claiming he was documenting best practices for his retirement presentation. What he discovered in the ship's medical waste disposal area made his blood run cold. Empty vials of ipecac syrup, a substance that causes violent nausea and vomiting, were mixed in with normal medical waste. Enough empty vials to dose dozens of passengers. Someone in the medical staff is deliberately poisoning passengers, Theo realized. But why? Medical technician Catherine was working late in the pharmacy when Theo approached her privately. His health inspector authority still carried weight, and she responded to his official questioning. Dr. Aaron has been ordering unusual quantities of anti-nausea medication, she admitted reluctantly, and requesting ipecac syrup for emergency protocols that don't make medical sense. Theo's investigation deepened as he discovered the horrifying truth. Nurse Frances had been adding ipecac to selected passengers' food, targeting families with children, couples on romantic dinners, anyone who might file complaints about their cruise experience. They're poisoning passengers to create medical emergencies they can then solve. Theo understood. Sick passengers are grateful passengers. They think the medical staff saved them from mysterious illness. But the scheme had a darker purpose. Medical coordinator Silas was documenting these successful treatments of mysterious illnesses as evidence of the medical team's competence, covering up a series of serious medical malpractice cases from earlier cruises. They're using induced illness to create false success stories, Theo realized, poisoning people to hide previous negligence. When Theo confronted Nurse Anne privately, she broke down and confessed the full conspiracy. Dr. Aaron said we had to improve our medical success statistics. The cruise line was investigating our malpractice claims from the last 3 voyages. The medical staff had been deliberately poisoning passengers with ipecac, then treating the induced symptoms with standard anti-nausea medication. The successful treatments created documentation to counter previous malpractice complaints. They're committing assault to cover up negligence, Theo realized, and using passengers as unwitting victims in their cover-up scheme. But when Theo tried to report the conspiracy to ship security, he discovered that Aaron had already identified him as a threat. The doctor had accessed Theo's passenger information and learned about his health inspector background. Mr. Theo has been spreading false accusations about our medical staff, Aaron told security. He's clearly suffering from paranoid delusions, possibly early dementia. I recommend medical supervision for the remainder of the cruise. Walker watched in horror as ship security attempted to escort his father to the medical bay for psychiatric evaluation. Theo realized that Aaron planned to drug him into submission or declare him mentally incompetent. They can't let me expose this, Theo understood. I know too much about their poisoning scheme. The ship's isolation became a trap. With no way to communicate with land-based authorities and security believing the medical staff's claims about Theo's mental state. He was trapped on a floating prison with people who were poisoning passengers. Theo managed to escape security and hide in the ship's lower decks with Walker's help. But Aaron had already identified other passengers who might support Theo's claims, including Janet and several other poisoning victims. They're going to drug everyone who might believe me, Theo told Walker as they hid in a maintenance area. We're trapped on a ship with medical staff who are poisoning people to cover up their crimes. The conspiracy expanded as Theo discovered that multiple crew members were involved. Catherine had been altering pharmacy records, Frances had been contaminating food, and Silas had been falsifying medical reports to create fake success stories. The entire medical department is corrupt, Theo realized. And they'll kill me before they let this exposure destroy their cover-up. Aaron announced over the ship's intercom that Theo was suffering from medical emergency requiring immediate intervention, and that any passenger harboring him would face serious consequences. Walker faced an impossible choice: turn in his father to save themselves from ship security, or help Theo expose a medical conspiracy that was poisoning innocent passengers. The climax came when Theo managed to contaminate Aaron's personal coffee with the same ipecac the doctor had been using on passengers. As Aaron experienced the violent nausea he'd been inflicting on others, Theo confronted him publicly in the ship's main dining area. "This is what you've been doing to passengers," Theo announced as Aaron vomited uncontrollably in front of hundreds of witnesses. "Poisoning people to create fake medical emergencies." But Aaron's confession was cut short when Francis injected Theo with a sedative, claiming he was having a violent psychiatric episode. As Theo lost consciousness, he realized the medical staff would now drug him permanently to prevent exposure of their crimes. Walker watched his father collapse, understanding that the ship's medical staff had just attempted murder to protect their conspiracy. The Norwegian Star continued toward Alaska, with Theo unconscious in the medical bay, his life now completely dependent on the very people who had been poisoning passengers. The investigation would later reveal that the medical staff had poisoned over 200 passengers across multiple cruises, using induced illness to create false documentation of successful treatments. Theo's health inspector expertise had identified a conspiracy that turned cruise ship medical care into a systematic assault on passengers. But for Theo, discovery came too late to prevent his own poisoning. The very people responsible for passenger safety had become the greatest threat to passenger survival, using medical authority to commit crimes that no one would believe until the evidence was undeniable. The ship's isolation meant no escape from medical staff who had turned healing into harm, using their trusted positions to poison the very people they were sworn to protect. Let's move to our sixth story. About a captain who found his daughter's life jackets floating empty while rescue boats circled helplessly overhead. Captain Jonathan had commanded cruise ships for 28 years, but this voyage was different. His twin 16-year-old daughters Emma and Sophia were aboard for the first time, celebrating their graduation. At 54, he thought showing them his world would make them proud. Instead, he was about to discover that being their father and their captain would force him to choose between saving his ship and saving his children. The engine room fire at 2:17 a.m. triggered standard evacuation protocols. But Jonathan's blood ran cold when he realized Emma and Sophia were sleeping in Deck 6, assigned to Lifeboat 12. "Sir, lifeboat deployment systems are malfunctioning," First Officer Everett reported grimly. "None of the boats are responding to deployment commands." Jonathan's command training kicked in, but his father's heart was screaming. "My girls are down there. Whatever's wrong with the lifeboats, Emma and Sophia are trapped." Leonardo, a 45-year-old architect traveling with his daughter Sarah, reached Muster Station 3 to find chaos. The 19-year-old had always been terrified of water. This cruise was supposed to help her overcome that phobia before college. "Dad, the boat isn't coming down," Sarah whispered, pointing at Lifeboat 12 hanging motionless 30 feet above the dark Atlantic. "Something's wrong." Lifeboat manager Alice frantically worked the deployment controls, but nothing responded. The boats remained locked in position, while the ship listed more severely. Jonathan abandoned the bridge against all protocols, rushing toward Deck 6. "I have to get to my daughters. I have to see them with my own eyes." But as he reached Deck 4, the ship's list hit 15 degrees, making further descent impossible. Through the chaos, he could hear Emma's voice over the emergency radio. "Dad, can you hear me? The lifeboat won't come down, and Sarah's family is panicking. The water looks so far away." Jonathan pressed the radio with shaking hands. "Emma, I'm coming for you. Hold on, sweetheart." Emergency Coordinator Diane made the devastating discovery. "Captain," it was later revealed that the evacuation system had been updated with efficiency protocols that overrode human judgment to prevent unnecessary expenses during emergencies. "The system is deciding my daughters don't need to be saved," Jonathan realized. Everett found the only solution. "Sir, I can force deployment, but it requires cutting the locks manually. The boats will drop uncontrolled, 30-foot fall to the water." Jonathan faced the impossible choice. Let his daughters die slowly as the ship sank, or order an uncontrolled drop that would likely kill them instantly. "Cut the locks," he commanded, his voice breaking. "All lifeboats, emergency drop." As Alice approached Lifeboat 12 with cutting equipment, Leonardo realized what was happening. "Everyone brace for impact. This is going to be a crash, not a lowering." Sarah gripped her father's hand. "Dad, I was right to be afraid of the water, wasn't I?" Leonardo held his daughter as the cutting torch severed the first cable. "You were right about everything, sweetheart." Lifeboat 12 dropped 15 feet before the second cable caught it with violent force. Sarah was thrown headfirst into a metal support beam, her skull cracking with a sound that Emma and Sophia would never forget. Jonathan heard the impact over the radio, his daughters screaming as Sarah collapsed unconscious and bleeding in their lifeboat. The second cable snapped, sending the boat plummeting into the Atlantic. Jonathan watched through binoculars as Lifeboat 12 hit the water upside down, disappearing beneath the waves with his daughters inside. "Emma! Sophia!" he screamed into the radio, but only static answered. Alice dove into the frigid water immediately, swimming toward the overturned boat. When she reached it, she could hear voices inside, passengers trapped in an air pocket that was rapidly filling with water. "Help us, please," came Emma's voice from inside the capsized boat. "Sophia can't swim well, and the water's coming in." Alice tried to flip the boat, but it was too heavy and unstable. She dove beneath it, finding the escape hatch blocked by Sarah's unconscious body and 2 other passengers who had drowned trying to get out. Leonardo managed to escape with Sarah, pulling her unconscious form to the surface. But behind him, he could hear other passengers still trapped inside, including Jonathan's daughters. Coast Guard Coordinator Micah arrived by helicopter to find multiple overturned lifeboats, but his divers couldn't reach the trapped passengers in time. The air pockets were too small, the boats too unstable to flip safely. Jonathan commandeered a rescue boat himself, abandoning his ship to search for his daughters. When he reached the overturned Lifeboat 12, it had been underwater for 18 minutes. The rescue divers found Emma and Sophia together in the final air pocket. Emma had used her life jacket to keep her weaker swimming sister afloat until the air ran out. They died holding hands. Jonathan pulled his daughters' bodies from the water himself, their graduation bracelets still on their wrists, the same bracelets they'd been so excited to show him that morning. As the Symphony of the Seas finally sank, Leonardo survived with Sarah, who suffered permanent brain damage from her head injury. His daughter's lifelong fear of water had been prophetic. She had known the ocean would try to kill her, and he had forced her to face that fear anyway. Alice retired from maritime service, unable to forget the sound of Emma and Sophia's voices calling for help from inside the overturned boat while she was powerless to save them. Jonathan never returned to the sea. He was found 3 days after the rescue, still holding his daughter's waterlogged graduation photos, sitting on the beach where their bodies had been recovered. Micah testified that the system had essentially murdered passengers by refusing to recognize the severity of their emergency. The computer decided they didn't deserve to be saved, he told investigators. Everett carried the guilt of not overriding the system sooner. "We trusted technology to make life and death decisions," he said. but it was programmed to value money more than people. But for Jonathan, no investigation could restore the sound of his daughter's laughter or erase the memory of their final radio call, asking why the lifeboat wouldn't come down to save them. Jonathan kept their graduation bracelets in his pocket until the day he died. A reminder that the most advanced safety technology in maritime history had murdered his children because a computer program valued efficiency over love. These 6 stories from the high seas remind us that our most relaxing vacations can become our worst nightmares in a matter of hours. From medical misdiagnoses to evacuation system failures, cruise ships present unique dangers that passengers rarely consider when booking their dream getaway. If these maritime horror stories kept you on the edge of your seat, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell for more shocking true stories. Which story disturbed you the most? Let us know in the comments below. And remember, the next time you step aboard a cruise ship, you'll never look at those safety demonstrations the same way again. Stay safe out there. Let's move to our 8th story. Ending with a doctor whose life-saving equipment turned into instruments of terror. Chief Medical Officer's log. Emergency protocol activated. Every monitor is lying. Ventilators are stopping. Heart machines show flat lines for healthy patients. Someone has weaponized our medical equipment against our patients. Axel had served as chief medical officer aboard luxury cruise ships for over 12 years. But nothing in her medical training had prepared her for the nightmare that began at 3:17 a.m. when the ship's medical equipment started trying to kill her patients. The Ocean Serenity's state-of-the-art medical facility was equipped with the most advanced computerized medical devices available, all connected to a central monitoring system that promised to revolutionize patient care at sea. What Axel discovered was that someone had turned every life-saving machine into a potential murder weapon. The first sign something was catastrophically wrong came when patient Aaron's heart monitor began displaying a flat line, while the 55-year-old man was clearly conscious and talking. Aaron had been admitted to the medical bay for routine chest pain monitoring after experiencing mild discomfort during dinner. His actual vital signs were completely normal, but every machine connected to him was showing that he was clinically dead. "Doctor, something's wrong with the equipment," Nurse Theo reported, her voice tight with confusion. "Aaron's heart monitor shows no pulse, but I can clearly see his pulse manually. The blood pressure cuff is reading 0, but he's obviously alive and conscious." Axel's medical training told her this had to be equipment malfunction, but her gut instinct warned her something far more sinister was happening. The ship's medical devices were all networked together through a computerized system that allowed real-time monitoring and automated medication delivery. If someone had gained access to this network, they could potentially control every machine that kept patients alive. Dr. Silas, the ship's surgeon, was preparing for an emergency appendectomy on patient Walker when every machine in the operating theater began malfunctioning simultaneously. The anesthesia machine started delivering dangerous levels of medication, while the heart-lung bypass machine began operating at settings that could cause brain damage. "The equipment is going haywire," Dr. Silas called over the ship's medical intercom. "I need manual backup for everything. The computerized systems are trying to kill my patient." But there were no manual backups for most of the ship's advanced medical equipment. Everything was digital, automated, and connected to the central system that someone had compromised. Head nurse Jonathan worked frantically to manually monitor patients, while the computerized systems displayed false readings that could trick medical staff into providing deadly treatments. Diabetic patient Emmett's insulin pump was showing normal glucose levels while secretly preparing to deliver a massive overdose that could cause fatal hypoglycemia. "The machines are lying to us," Axel announced over the medical bay's communication system. "Every reading, Every automated function could be false or weaponized. We need to assume that our own equipment is trying to harm our patients. The hack was sophisticated beyond anything medical cybersecurity experts had imagined possible. Medical assistant Milo discovered that the compromised system wasn't just displaying false information. It was actively trying to harm patients while making it appear like natural medical emergencies or equipment accidents. Elderly patient Everett's pacemaker began receiving signals that could cause fatal arrhythmias. The device that was supposed to regulate his heartbeat was being remotely controlled to create the very heart problems it was designed to prevent. Guest services manager Micah rushed to the medical bay when passengers throughout the ship began reporting relatives with medical devices experiencing sudden emergencies. "We have passengers collapsing all over the ship," she reported to Axel. "People with pacemakers, insulin pumps, and other medical devices are having simultaneous malfunctions. This can't be coincidence." Ship's Captain Harrison called an emergency meeting when he realized the scope of the crisis. Chief Security Officer Giovanni reported that the medical equipment hack appeared to be part of a larger cyber attack targeting the ship's most vulnerable passengers. The manager Ryan worked desperately to isolate the medical systems. But the hackers had anticipated this response. Every time we try to disconnect a compromised device, the system triggers emergency protocols that could kill patients, Ryan explained to the emergency response team. "The hackers have booby-trapped our own safety systems. If we shut down the network, patients dependent on life support could die. If we leave it running, the equipment will kill them anyway." Chief Engineer Carson attempted to physically disconnect the medical bay's network connections, but discovered that critical life support systems would fail without network connectivity. The ship's medical facility had been designed with such integrated technology that manual operation was nearly impossible. Communications Officer George contacted emergency medical services on shore. But the hackers had also compromised the ship's medical communication systems. False emergency broadcasts were being transmitted that could misdirect rescue efforts or provide incorrect medical information to responding hospitals. The most horrifying discovery came when Axel realized that the hack was designed to mimic natural medical emergencies. Surgery patient Luis experienced what appeared to be surgical complications. But Axel suspected the computerized surgical equipment had been programmed to cause the very problems it was supposed to prevent. Pregnant passenger Declan went into premature labor that appeared natural until Axel discovered that the fetal monitoring equipment had been sending false distress signals that triggered unnecessary medical interventions. The hackers were using the ship's own medical protocols against patients, creating cascading medical emergencies that looked like natural occurrences. "This isn't just equipment failure," Axel told Dr. Silas during a brief consultation between emergencies. "Someone has studied our medical protocols and programmed our equipment to cause the exact complications that would justify lethal treatments. They're using our own medical knowledge to murder patients while making it look like we made mistakes." The psychological warfare aspect became clear when medical staff realized they couldn't trust any of their equipment. Nurses were afraid to administer medications because computerized dosing systems might be compromised. Doctors couldn't rely on vital sign monitors because the readings might be false. Every medical decision became a potentially fatal gamble. FBI Medical Crimes Unit Agent Sawyer, coordinating the investigation via emergency communication, explained that the attack represented a new form of bioterrorism. The perpetrators have weaponized medical technology itself. Every device that's supposed to save lives has become a potential murder weapon that can kill patients while making it appear like natural medical events or human error. Medical device expert Jasper analyzed the hack remotely and discovered that the attack had been planned for months. The hackers infiltrated medical device manufacturers' systems and installed malicious code directly into the equipment before it was shipped to the cruise line. Every machine in your medical bay was compromised before it ever arrived on the ship. Biomedical engineer Ryder, consulting from a major hospital, provided technical support for manually operating equipment that had never been designed for non-computerized use. Modern medical devices are so dependent on software that most medical staff have never learned to operate them manually. The hackers exploited our over-reliance on automation. The attack reached its peak when patient Aaron's compromised heart monitor triggered an automated defibrillation sequence that could have stopped his healthy heart. Only Axel's quick intervention to physically disconnect the device prevented what would have appeared to be a tragic medical accident caused by equipment malfunction. Pharmaceutical executive Arlo arrived via helicopter with emergency medical supplies that couldn't be compromised by the hack. But many patients had already suffered permanent damage from treatments based on false medical readings. The hackers had succeeded in turning the ship's medical bay into a weapon against the people it was designed to protect. The investigation revealed that the attack had been carried out by a group calling itself Digital Hippocrates. Hackers who claimed they were exposing the dangers of over-computerized medicine by proving that medical technology could be turned against patients. Their message was that the medical industry's rush toward automation had created vulnerabilities that could be exploited to cause mass casualties. Axel's medical log became evidence in the largest medical terrorism case in history. Her documentation showed how every computerized medical device aboard the ship had been turned into a potential weapon. From insulin pumps that could deliver fatal overdoses to ventilators that could suffocate patients while appearing to function normally. The psychological aftermath for medical staff was severe. Axel and her team developed what psychiatrists called medical technology anxiety, the inability to trust computerized medical equipment that had become essential to modern healthcare. Many never returned to practicing medicine, too traumatized by seeing their healing tools turned into instruments of death. Patients who survived the hack suffered from permanent medical anxiety, afraid to use any computerized medical devices. Aaron never trusted electronic heart monitors again, preferring manual pulse checks despite their limitations. The attack had destroyed faith in the very technology that made modern medical care possible. The hackers were eventually traced through the compromised medical device code. But their attack had exposed fundamental vulnerabilities in computerized medical systems. New regulations required that all medical devices maintain manual operation capabilities. But the damage to public confidence in medical technology was permanent. Dr. Silas documented the surgical complications caused by the hack, showing how computerized surgical equipment had been programmed to cause the very problems surgeons were trying to fix. His report led to major changes in surgical equipment design, but also highlighted how dependent modern medicine had become on vulnerable computer systems. The Ocean Serenity medical hack became a case study taught in medical schools worldwide, showing how the technology meant to heal could be weaponized to harm. For Axel and her medical team, the experience was a permanent reminder that in the digital age, even life-saving medical equipment could become an instrument of death. The cruise line eventually faced hundreds of millions in lawsuits from passengers whose medical conditions were worsened by the hack. But no amount of money could restore confidence in computerized medical care. The attack had proven that the most trusted medical technology was only as safe as its weakest cybersecurity link. Years later, Axel works as a consultant helping hospitals develop manual backup procedures for computerized medical equipment. When machines that are supposed to heal start trying to kill, she tells medical conferences, you realize that putting computers between doctors and patients creates vulnerabilities that our medical oath never prepared us to handle. The Digital Hippocrates group was never fully dismantled. and similar attacks have been reported at hospitals worldwide. The Ocean Serenity incident serves as a warning that medical technology's life-saving capabilities can be instantly transformed into life-threatening weapons by anyone with sufficient hacking skills and malicious intent. The most chilling aspect of the attack was its demonstration that modern medicine's greatest strength, computerized precision and automation, was also its greatest weakness. In trying to make medical care more efficient and accurate, the industry had created systems that could be turned against the very patients they were designed to protect. This concludes our journey through 8 technology disasters that transformed cruise ship dreams into digital nightmares. From AI systems that interpreted screams as applause to medical equipment that tried to murder patients, these stories reveal the dark side of our connected world, where every convenience comes with invisible dangers, and every system designed to protect us can be turned into a weapon against us. These 8 stories reveal a terrifying truth about our modern world. The very technology we trust to make life easier can instantly become our greatest enemy. Every cruise ship sailing today carries thousands of passengers who believe their smart devices, entertainment systems, and medical equipment will keep them safe. But as we've seen, one corrupted line of code, one malicious hacker, or one system failure can turn paradise into a nightmare. The scariest part? These aren't science fiction scenarios. They're glimpses into vulnerabilities that exist right now in our connected world. Every time you step aboard a modern cruise ship, you're surrounded by thousands of computerized systems that could malfunction or be weaponized at any moment. If these technology horror stories gave you chills, make sure to hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. Share this video with someone who thinks modern technology is always safe. They need to know the dark truth about our digital world. Drop a comment below. Which story terrified you the most? The AI that misunderstood screams as applause, or the medical equipment that tried to murder patients? And remember, next time you see a smart device promising to make your life better, ask yourself, what happens when that intelligence turns against you? Stay safe out there, and thanks for watching.